Hello.
Morning, Alf. How you doing?
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, good. And welcome all to part 10 of My Life, My Music with the Governor, Alan Hudson, as we take a trip down memory lane and relive those halcyon days through chapter and verse. So, firstly, Al, we finished the last podcast with a cup final theme. This theme's going to be about Sea Biscuit. But first, let's just indulge slightly more on those Chelsea years and your brothers in arms, in actual fact, and Hutch and Osgood in particular.
Yeah, great subject. Hutch and Oz were. I've never seen anything like it at any football club I've been at. It was if you can imagine two players being thrown together, one from the Southern League. The Southern League in those days were for players who had either retired and they'd gone to last their, like putting a horse out the stud, really. And for older players and for younger players come through, they probably put them in to toughen them up, because that was one tough league,
Yeah.
I'd see my brother playing it, and my brother played against Hutch in that league, and I was speaking to my friend Jeff Powell, who played with my brother. We did a podcast together, and I swear, I said, Jeff, I wouldn't have gone down that route. If I would have got turned away at the top level, then I would have gone window cleaning with my father. There's no way I'd have played. I wouldn't have gone out in the Southern League and played, mate. But Hutch came from the Southern League, and he brought the Southern League into our Chelsea team, and that's what we needed. Ozzy needed someone along. I mean, Ozzy could handle himself, don't get me wrong. But Hutch was like his minder. Ozzy was bigger than him, taller than him, and he could look after himself, Osgood, but Hutch watched his back wherever he went all over the field. And if anyone, I've seen Hutch many a time just glare at centre halves when they hit Ozzy. And I remember the instance at Nottingham Forest when big Sammy Chapman did something, and he's a big mean centre half, and in a flurry, in 60 seconds, Sammy was carried off on a stretcher, and Hutch was walking beside him with a broken arm, being red carded. But that's how tough he was, Hutch, But he brought that into our team and give us that. I wouldn't say it was inspiring, but he was a great outlet for us. When Charlie and I couldn't play, we could just throw it up in the air and there would be Hutch,
Now, many years later, you bumped into Sammy, and you recalled the story about that incident with him, didn't you?
I did. I reminded him that he forgot. Yeah, Sammy kind of he blanked that one. He smiled. I think. But no, I've got to say that I laugh. I don't laugh about it. I smile about it because I loved Hutch. I loved him dearly, and he went off the rails a bit. We all went off the rails in certain ways, but there's a certain limit. But he took it to the ultimate limit, But on the field, I don't think there was a centre half in the country 1-on-1 that would have got the better of Hutch.
Now, going back to that game that you and your dad watched your brother John play for Guildford against Burton, your dad was absolutely enamoured with Hutch. I read your piece. You do some wonderful writings in your on your Facebook page, and then on your official page as well. And I love the way that, because when you write when you wrote the Working Man's Ballet, it really is, you read and you read between the lines, like you used to play the ball between the lines, and you almost feel as though you're there at the time, and you can imagine your dad walking back through the door and talking about this player, and your mum says, "Blimey, I've never heard you say that about another player apart from Alan and John before." And
Well,
that's the
yeah.
impact, isn't it?
Well, no, it was just. I was a kid.
Yeah.
I actually weren't at the game, Paul, but
Right, okay.
I was playing myself on, in Chelsea reserves or youth team or whatever. My brother was going to sign pro and under Doherty, and Doherty reneged on the deal, and led to problems with him and my father. But my old man knew what he was doing. You read the thing about he went up for the coaching thing, and he walked out on, they asked him to make a cup of tea, and he for everyone, and he says no. He says, I don't even do that at home. I haven't come here to make tea. I've come here to get a badge, and he walked out. So I think that's where I probably got it without knowing it. But this particular morning, it was a Sunday morning as usual. His best mate was a fella called Arthur Bell, and he would come round and see. He was Chelsea mad. We were Fulham mad. He shouldn't have been talking about that in our kitchen, because we were Fulham. And he was Jimmy Greaves mad, and he was always on about Jimmy Greaves. And my dad had stopped him. All right, Arthur, enough's enough. He says, you wait till Alan wears his number 8 shirt. You'll see a player. And he says, oh, by the way, I see a fella play yesterday against John, and he didn't rave about him. He just told him exactly what it was. He just come out. He said, because my father was supposed to have been a bit of a handful on the field, and I suppose that was what he caught his eye, especially in that league, in that Southern League. You really had to be able to handle yourself, and as I say, I see a couple of matches, and it was quite scary. And he just said, there's absolute, this kid could be anything. He was no Osgood. He was a complete opposite of Osgood. He was never going to be a Jimmy Greaves. His control wasn't great. He was a raw. Actually, that's what I think my dad might have said. He's raw, and there's no telling what he could be if a good manager, if someone like Waddington had got hold of him, he'd have made him into. He'd have got the very best out of him, let's put it that way. And I think Hutch would have played a lot longer under Waddington, because he would have sat him down and said, look now, Ian, you don't get no medals. You don't get for putting your head where you shouldn't. Fools rush in. Yep. Don't get your head kicked off. Don't go in there. Don't, be a bit cagier about it, where Hutch would just rush in and smash defenders and go in between. You've never seen anyone so brave and irresponsible, mate. It scared me. He really scared me, and it was, and his career was for somebody who was legendary at Chelsea. He only played for about 18 months.
Yeah, it's almost like a tragedy, isn't it? And that leads us to our first record from the Bee Gees, Tragedy. And we're still going to stay with Hutch, because his career, it was a bit of a tragedy, wasn't it? The way that, as you've alluded to, he got injured where there's times he shouldn't have gone in. He almost caused riots on the pitch as well, when he pushed Billy Bremner over in that replay. And
Well, he gives. I mean, I remember the scene. I mean, I watched that cup final replay. I was in a blur
Yeah.
through missing it, and I was really upset, and I couldn't handle the situation really.
Mm,
I'd seen the replay
yeah.
once, and Bremner was on his knees, and Hutch just looked down at him, and I could read his lips. And he just was kind of telling him that, look, that this, this wasn't all about Leeds.
Yeah.
We really give it to Bremner, and you see the one where Dave Mackay picked him up. Well, Hutch was telling him verbally that, that he was kind of warning him. It was like a gangster movie, really. That this is your one last chance. You will get him, Billy.
Mm.
And he like mimicked with his hand at Bremner, and Bremner was on his knees, and that could have turned the game, because things like that in games, and because people like Bremner and Giles, they're okay when they're intimidating people, and but Leeds were bullies. There's no doubt about it. But when they couldn't bully you, you were on an even playing field, and Hutch kind of made that very clear to them. And he was a fantastic leader. He scored the equaliser at Wembley, and then he went on. He took the throw. He threw it for a million miles for the winner. As I say, he was not the most talented footballer in the world. He wouldn't get in a Manchester City or Liverpool team today, because he couldn't play that lovely intricate football they play, the lovely 1-2s and all that. But when you needed him, mate, he was a great get-out ball. If ever I got in trouble on the field and it was too tight and there was nothing on, Hutch was always on the back of my mind, and he would spring to the front of my mind, and I'd just put it up there, and there he'd be,
And also tragedy in the last time that you saw the big fella as well. It was, heartbreaking, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. I had just come out of not long been out of my coma, and I've been through all that trauma, but I was pretty much fine,
Yeah.
I came through. That they were frightened. I had a blood clot on the brain, and that worried them for a while. And a lot of people said I didn't have no brain, but that's another story. But I kind of came through, and I was going along all right. And I heard that Hutch was in hospital, and I said to my uncle, I was on my crutches at the time, and I said, we must go and see him. A bit worried about him, blah blah. I hadn't seen him for a while, obviously, and I got there, and he still had his film star good looks.
Yeah.
He looked absolutely. It was like a film scene when I walked into the ward. He looked fantastic. I thought he was kidding me, Paul. He looked at me and he smiled out the corner of his eye, and I didn't. And then I realised that he didn't really recognise me, and it was. He had such a cheeky way about him, Hutch, and it was a lovely, lovely fellow. He drove in. The story goes he drove into Stamford Bridge on a motorbike with a leather jacket, thinking he was like Jack Nicholson,
Yeah.
And he was told straight away. And within 6 months, we had bred a monster. I think that's the right way how it goes. And but he was a lovely lad. And we walked out of the hospital, and I said to my uncle George, I said, we got to get out of here. And then the nurse said, please don't, we can't handle him. Don't go. I said, well, I can't handle him, love. I said, I don't think he realises that he doesn't know I am. And it was a very, very sad moment. And the last time I see him, and I went up the next time, I was just hugged his girlfriend at the memorial or whatever, and it was a very sad moment. It was a absolute tragedy, because not only his career. You can imagine coming from Burton Albion, and you win the FA Cup with Chelsea. He must have went home to Burton and been a hero, and it all ended in tears.
But he was a teetotal, and he was a family-loving guy with a beautiful wife that he adored, and vice versa. And you know, within 18 months, you turned him into a womanising alcoholic, hadn't you, you guys
Well,
on
that
the
was
King's Road?
they were. I must take responsibility for that. You can't say that.
But that's what Chelsea was about and the King's Road was about. And what I'm trying to get at, Al, is, you know, when players are born to play at clubs and are conducive with what they've got to play at clubs, you know, if you're not that kind of player, that club and that lifestyle can consume you and really change you in an
Well,
instant.
I put
Yeah.
Paul. You've hit something on the head
Mm.
there. I mean, it wasn't so much if you was a good player or not
Yeah.
at Chelsea. It was if you could stand the test
Yep.
of the King's Road.
Yep.
If you could overcome the King's Road, and I mean Charlie Cook and Tommy Baldwin down the King's Road, they'd be arm wrestling with Richard Harris, Peter O'Toole, uh, Oliver Reed at 3 o'clock in the morning down the King's Road, drunk with these people, and then come in training and tell us the story. Where you been? He said, and Charlie would say, "Oh, he's been with Richard Harris, the man called Horse," you know, and you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's Charlie came down from Scotland. He was the closest thing ability wise to George Best, and he was amazing talent. But he went down that King's Road, and you could see it had such an effect on him. There was moments of his magic, like in the cup final replay, but that one bit of magic came from him. He was still had the magic, but and then he came off the booze completely. And I played against him in America for California, and he had that sparkle back. And you know, he was an amazing talent. But the King's Road, he couldn't. He took on the King's Road, and he beat him.
Yeah. I think the King's Road beat many, as did Chelsea. Your iconic team beat many. Hutch, although he did go to Chelsea, almost never, well, it wasn't an almost, but your dad did tell Bobby Robson on a train journey with you on the way to Highbury that Fulham should have a look at him as he did with you. But strangely, Fulham didn't with both, and you both ended up Chelsea legends. But I suppose that's the way it is, isn't it? Some listen, some don't.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I
Mm.
know that's. I
Yeah,
think that is a way of life.
yeah.
Going back to yesterday with this thing with Jeff, I did. You know, we talk about how one man can change your path in life.
Yeah.
One manager, wrongly so, which I'm so against management
Mm.
in that way and suits. They can ruin you, and one man shouldn't have that much power. And my father, very innocently, Bobby Robson was manager of Fulham. We got on a train after a match at Arsenal. We took there for my education. I watched George Easton. And we got on the train, and Bobby Robson, being the manager of Fulham, my father, he wasn't one of those people that were going to pester you or nothing. You know, he was very much. I'm very much like him. And he just said, "Bobby, can I have a minute of your time if I can tell you about this kid I see on Saturday play against my son?" And he said, "If I can say, you should go send someone to go and see him." He said, "Because we need somebody up front to play that." I think they had Alan Clark at one time. They had Rodney Marsh at one time. Malcolm MacDonald had a spell. But Hutch would have been. He would have been, if he kept himself fit and gone to Fulham. And my dad kind of threw in a sideline with him and said, "Oh, by the way, this is my son. He's apprentice at Chelsea, and his ambition is to play for Fulham." And it went over his head.
Yeah.
It was sad, really. It was. And then years later, he came on a tour with Stoke City. This is 10, 12 years later, and 15 years later. And he'd been England manager and everything else, and he was rated one of the greatest coaches in the world, Bobby Robson. And he looked at me a couple of times. He was up with us for about 8 days, and I couldn't get the strength to speak to him. I was just I thought if you can't speak to my father, then you can't speak to me, kind of thing, you know.
But one man that did always listen, and that leads us into Seabiscuit territory, was Tony Waddington, because your story is very much like Seabiscuit. So let's indulge firstly about Seabiscuit and tell the listeners who Seabiscuit was, because before I started doing the podcast with you, Alan, talking to you and reading your almost your scriptures, I didn't know who Seabiscuit was, but he changed the attitude of a nation, didn't he? It's incredible.
Well, it's for those who are not into horse racing. I love my horse racing. I love. I'm not. I'm not a total nutcase about it, but I do. They fascinate. Horses fascinate me. I love. I loved. I loved. I once had a horse. We rented a horse off Red Hollinshead called My Lifetime Lady, who's the greatest, the only female that broke my heart really when I lost her. And I just I love watching them on the gallops. I love watching them. They fascinate me. They've got these legs which I don't know understand how they carry that much weight on the, and that they're so honest. They're so brave. They're wonderful animals. And I read about Seabiscuit. I went to Seabiscuit Day in Santa Anita when I come out of hospital, and I followed the story, see the film, and yeah, the story was so much like what happened to me with Tony, because it was a horse. It was in the Depression, wasn't it? The
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Wall Street had crashed. Um, the jockeys fire. Everybody had gone skint apart from, the certain ones who were who were fortunate. Uh, and Unbeknown to anyone, this you couldn't plan it again. Like you couldn't plan what me and Tony coming together. It was just unseen what Tony done. How he paid so much money for me when I was broken down, and paid a record fee for a player that was out of form and falling out of love with the game and going nowhere. And he sees something in me like Tom Smith seeing Seabiscuit, and he said in the film that the fella that spoke, the narrator, he said that Tom Smith they looked through each other, him and the horse. They walked the horse through the dark in a training session, and he caught they both it was on film. He looked at him, and he told Charles Howard, the man with the money. He says, I think we should buy this horse. And he said, but the horse is broken down. He says, I can fix him. And he fixed him, and he got his confidence back, because it was a top-rated horse as a young horse, and he got injured. And then what happened was, it was much like me again. I got injured and I got ignored. I got pushed into the background, and no treatment and lack of treatment. So I fell out with a manager. I fell out with two managers over it. And this can happen. And Seabiscuit could have so easily just been forgotten. And that they put it in races that were worth like £100 races, and it went on to win the £1 million race.
Yeah.
All because of this one man that saved him. And it was Seabiscuit. Is such an inspiration. And it gives, as Charles Howard said, if a horse can do this to our nation, then our nation can pick itself up, because a little horse like this has proved that he can beat Man of War, who was a massive horse. It was an unbeatable horse. Well, he proved that it wasn't. This little horse who got it, he was brought back to life. He got fit again, and he broke his leg again, and then he came back again, and he proved he won the Santa Anita Derby, the handicap there, and it's a wonderful story. It really is.
In many ways, it's the greatest story ever about the triumph of an underdog, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got the other, the one about the great. They say the greatest horse that won all them races. I've actually got it over the back there, sitting there. But Seabiscuit was, they can argue. You can talk about footballers and say who was the best player. No one will ever know who's the best. But as regards what Seabiscuit went through and the heartbreak it must, I mean, it really does make you think if only a horse could talk.
Yeah. And
If that horse could talk and tell you the pain that it went through and how he could tell, like I speak of Tony Waddington, that horse would talk about Tom Smith and tell you that he saved not only his life, but it took him to such heights,
But that's what Tom did, didn't he? He whispered to the horse. I mean, this was, to all intents and purposes at that time, a crazy horse. The horse would go mad. It would bite people. But Tom, just as you say, they looked at each other. They connected with each other. He fed the horse. He whispered in the horse. And he built the horse to be the greatest horse on the planet. It just is an incredible story.
In the film, that it was kicking the doors down in his stall, and they were putting all animals in to be with him to try and calm him down, and these animals were being thrown over the top of the stall and flying over people's heads. And then one day he walked in and brought this great big horse, lovable horse, and he sat, a big white horse, and he sat it down next to Seabiscuit, and it calmed him down. And it kind of, when you think that they don't talk, it's like probably a dolphin. I don't know. They reckon they send these signs out. And someone was telling me the other day about that they took their kid over to, this little girl to see the dolphins because she's got the same thing as my little nephew. And it kind of cured the little girl to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Where just getting in the water with going around with the dolphins, and the effect it had on this little girl, and it makes you wonder. And the horses, they have this wonderful way about them. I've spoke to several jockeys, and that you can understand. I fell in love with a horse when I had my horse. I mean, I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and go down the yard and see her and all that. And it was just, it's more than any. I've got to say, mate, it's more than any woman.
Mm.
A 2-year-old. She was a 2-year-old filly, and if I'd have had a daughter, I couldn't have showed her any more affection. It was just incredible the way they are. You can see why people fall in love. You can see why people pay a lot of people pay money to earn money out of them, but it's an incredible. You can see why people go there and they stand around a paddock and watch these wonderful animals walk by,
But it is incredible that, if you treat people or treat animals or treat anything with the respect, with the love, with the tender care, it's quite incredible what results that you can get. And that is pretty much what Tony Waddington did to you. A little old wine drinking me, Dean Martin, that's a song. And a song that reminds you of the time when you went back to Chelsea for Stoke, scored the goal that got Stoke into Europe with a 1-0 away win, and that you were waiting for the train, and the gaffer turns up with a crate of champagne and sorts all you boys out and sticks an extra one in your bag, looks at you, smiles, just like Tom did to Seabiscuit, and you guys were just up and running, and you could, I don't think there's an argument, I don't think anybody would say anything different, that you played your best football at Stoke, and that was because of a guy that connected with you, that got to the inner Alan Hudson, water pitches for you, done everything for you, put you on that football pitch, made you you made yourself the greatest midfield player in the world at that time. And how could you not repay somebody with that faith in you? And I think that's a great lesson in life for all of us.
I'm praying for rain in California, so the grapes can grow and they can make more wine. And I'm sitting in a honky in Chicago with a broken heart and a woman on my mind. I matched the man behind the bar or the jukebox, and the music takes me back to Tennessee. When they ask who's a fool in the corner crying, I say, a little old wine drinker me. I came here last week from down in Nashville, 'cause my baby left for Florida on a train. I thought I'd get a job and just forget her, but in Chicago a broken heart is still the same. I matched the man behind the bar for the jukebox, and the music takes me back to Tennessee. When they ask who's a fool in the corner crying, I say, a little old wine drinker me. I say, a little old wine drinker me.
But I think there's a lesson to be learned here, because I have a lot of problem with my former teammates at Stoke City.
Yeah, I know.
And they weren't very happy when Tony brought me into the club. Mm-hmm. They didn't like that. They didn't like what they read about me. They didn't know me. I played against them a few times. They thought I was, I don't know. I'm very self-confident. I'm not arrogant.
Yeah.
What they don't understand, these people, and I've told them, and I write certain things, and I send it to them actually, and I make sure that they see it. That what Tony did for me, they thought Tony was going out of his way to do this just for me, because he paid a lot of money for me, and they thought that he had to make it work for me because his head was on the line, because he paid then £250,000, which was a record signing, the most money ever paid. They thought he was under pressure, so he had to get the best of it. Well, that was nonsense. That was absolute, complete nonsense. What they didn't understand was, and Tony told me one day, I went in to see him one day about one of our players complaining about he wouldn't let him, Jackie Marsh, they wouldn't let him go. We were sitting having a pint, and Jackie said he won't let me go to Los Angeles in the summer. And I said, well, what's all that about, Jack? And I wasn't captain of the team, and we were sitting next door to Tony's office, basically. He was in the social club. And I said, what's all this about, Jackie? And I said, before you go any further, if you badmouth him, mate, we don't drink together anymore. Yeah, I said, because you're out of order. If you're going to say something about somebody, say it to their face. I said, so don't sit here doing this. I said, but you just tell me. And he told me, and I got up and I walked out the bar, and I walked in and knocked on Tony's door. It was only like not even a minute's walk. It was next door to the ground. And I knocked on his door and I sat down with him, and he couldn't. The only time I'd been in his office apart from a Saturday to pick up my tickets, and I was surprised to see him. I'd only ever seen him in a restaurant and a bar. I'd never seen him anywhere else. And he went, "Oh, Alan, what can I do for you?" And it was kind of weird. It was because we'd never been in this situation. I'd never even been in the office when I signed, you know. And he went, "Sit down. What's up?" You know, I said, "No, nothing." I said, "Nothing wrong, Tony, at all." I said, "But we're having a drink next door." I said, "There's Jeff Sammons, Jimmy Greenoff, Sean Hazelgrave and me." I said, "We're sitting round and Jackie's just mentioned you won't let him go to Los Angeles." He says, "Alan, he can go to Los Angeles." He said, "But he hasn't asked me, number one. And number two, if he comes in and knocks on my door and can sit down like you can sit down and have a sensible conversation and just talk to me like we talk," he said, "he can go anywhere he wants." He said, "But he'd rather sit round and have 2 or 3 pints and do what most players do, moan and groan about their life when I always say," and I said to my son, who's now the American coach, you've got to tell your players to embrace what they got, because they haven't got it for long. If they keep moaning and groaning about this and that, enjoy what they have. Go in and see the manager and say, "Tony, look, I think this, I think that." Don't think that Tony would have done the same for Dennis Smith. He would have done the same for Mickey Paget. He loved Gordon Banks because Gordon Banks was the same as me. Gordon Banks would treat Tony like a friend.
Yeah.
And that is the way you have to be in football. You can't. This is not a war. It's only war when it comes to like you and Revy or you and Ramsey. When people do you harm. But Tony didn't do anybody any harm. He was only there to help people. Nobody wanted them players to be better players more than Tony. So I don't get their way of their drift of thinking. It just doesn't add up to me. And I used to say to them, "Well, what is your problem?" You know, he wants the same for you as he wants for me. He wants everybody in his dressing room to be at their best, and he wants success for Stoke City, and that is the bottom line.
And pretty much that's what he done. And he also gave you another great bit of advice by, I'm guessing as well, knowing you, knowing Tony, by not actually saying too much, but just being the wonderful person and man manager that he was. You got beat at Lincoln one night and you all ended up having a nightcap because Tony couldn't sleep, could he?
Well, that was just a wonderful piece of management.
Yeah.
But take that manager's sign off his door and forget his manager for a minute. I know what that was all about. Other players don't understand. They think that he was waiting up for them to give him a bollocking for being out at 3 o'clock in the morning when he didn't give a. He wanted you could go and stay out all night with Tony. It didn't matter as long as you played on a Saturday. But I know what happened. He knew that he was so annoyed and he was so disappointed that, and Graham Taylor, the old England manager, was the manager of Lincoln that time, and he was unheard of, and that he was making things happen at Lincoln. We shouldn't go there and get beat, and we underachieved. It was unacceptable. Our performance was unacceptable, and that included the goalkeeper, Peter Shilton. It was unacceptable the way we got beat. I didn't play nowhere near as well as I can because we were all over the place and we played terribly. But there's no excuse for that. Not in cup matches especially. And I knew that Tony, if he went, he would have had a few drinks after the game. I know if he'd have been like me, I'm completely the same person. If something's on my mind, I have to. I've sent you emails,
yep.
And you must have looked on your email and see 4 o'clock in the morning. 5. What's he doing?
Yeah,
I'm up at the man because I can't sleep. If I've got something on my mind, I've got to get it off my mind. And Tony had so much on his mind that night. He waited for us to come in, and he wanted to sort things out. All right, some people say, well, you don't do it when you've had a drink, but yes, you do, because the door was, it wasn't a big hotel, it was a smallish hotel. We was in Lincoln, and the front door was locked. And one of the boys went to the drain pipe, trying to climb up the drain pipe, the first floor. And I said, "Oi, come get down here! You're going to break your neck. What are you doing?" Because he didn't want to be caught. He thought that he was going to get in trouble for being out late. And I went, "No, it's not that. It's something to miss." And then all of a sudden, this voice come out from the letterbox almost, and said, "Right, I'm going to unlock this door, and you're going to come in. You're going to sit down with me." And everyone gathered, and we walked in, about 6, 7 of us. And he said to the night porter, "Put some chairs along there." He said, "And go and get us some drinks."
Yeah.
And he sat down, and he didn't rant, he didn't rave. He just said, "Look, I'm here tonight," he said, "because you've been out enjoying yourself, which you shouldn't be." He said, your drink wouldn't have tasted the same after the way you played today." He said that, that wasn't you. It's just not acceptable for any of you. You've all let yourself down. You've let the club down. You've let the fans down, and more important, you've let me down because I trust you. And that was it. We had a couple of drinks. We went to bed, and I'm sure Tony slept for a couple of hours and felt better. And we went on the Saturday. I think we beat Leeds on the Saturday, and we went on a pretty good run. I think I checked it the other day. We went 12 matches. We won 8 and drawn 2. I mean, we didn't play anyone like Lincoln. We beat Chelsea. We beat Leeds. I think we beat Leeds and Liverpool. And so that was if it had been Dave Sexton, he would have gone to bed, slept, and then train journey home in the morning, and then he would have had the ump with us for going out to the club, and nothing would have been said. It's like a marriage, you have to say something.
That marriage, going back to Dave, ended at 10:30 Monday the 31st of December 1973, when you and Osgood walked off the training field, and Dave approached you and pretty much said, "That's it, marriage over," didn't he?
Well, it was it was the strangest. It was the strangest thing. It was so political. It was so. There was something going on that we didn't know about. At Chelsea, they decided to build this new stand or resurrect it, and they got very much in debt. And I know Dave wanted to knock the stadium down for a certain reason, because there was a certain bar in there he didn't like us going in. And he see it one of two ways. We could pay, me and Piros could pay to get this stand done. So we played West Ham, and then after the game he come in to me and Ozzy, and he shouldn't have picked us, singled us out. I scored one of the goals. I made one of the other goal. We were 2-0 up. We lost 4-2. 4 terrible defensive blunders. How can a centre forward and a midfield player get, the blame for four goals? I don't know. And then he picked the team against Sheffield United on New Year's Day, I think it was, and but it was on the 31st that it all happened, and we was in training, and me and Oz, we went into training this day. We said, we're not playing in the first team. We probably won't be wanted with them. He won't want us with them. Let them get on with it. And Dario Gradi was in charge of the reserves, and we went to train with Dario, and Dario said, "Are you sure you're all right?" I said, "Well, Dario, we're playing in your team tomorrow. We should train with you, surely, So that seemed all right. Then all of a sudden, a messenger come over and said, "Dave's not happy, send them over here." And we were going on our way over, me and Oz, and Dave was coming towards us like Mike Tyson, coming into the ring, and he was fuming, you could face like thunder, and him and Osgood clashed, and I just stood there and watched him. I knew that was it. And he said, "You can go." He said, "You can get out and don't come back." And the terrible thing about it was, when he come to me, Osgood kind of run away, and I said, "Look, Dave, what you just said to him." He says, "Look, I'm not interested in what you got to say." He said, "I've been trying to get rid of you for ages, and I said, well, that's fair enough, and I walked away. And but when it come to the tribunal, Chelsea twisted it around and said that I asked for a transfer, when it was pretty clear that they'd already instigated all this. They'd sat down around, him and Brian Mears, the chairman, had sat round and said, look, if we can get 600 grand for these, they didn't realise that I was going to be a record signing because I was playing that badly.
Yep.
But Tony Cannelly, Tony would have got me for 150 grand if he'd have only gone in bottom line, because Chelsea wanted me out badly and they needed the money badly. So to pay that money, you know, I'd have rather him paid 150 grand and me and him split the other 100 grand. That would have been the better deal, because Tony deserved it for the masterstroke. But that was all planned, Paul. That was all planned. What they did to me and Ozzy, and that was, yeah, as you say, it was on the last day of the year, which turned out to be the best thing that ever happened in my football life.
Again, interesting that not interested in what you've got to say as the manager, and also I'm guessing that would translate also to Terry Neal at Arsenal, not interested in what you've got to say, Ud. However, Tony Waddington, I'm all ears. I'm interested, Alan, in what you've got to say and in you as a person and a player. Fundamental difference. And going back again to Seabiscuit, the film come out in 2003. On that day in 1973, Merry Christmas, Everybody's Having Fun by Slade was number one. You and Osgood wasn't having fun. There wasn't much fun going on at Chelsea. They did at Stoke. Oz should have joined you at Stoke, but reneged on the deal and took him to Southampton instead, didn't he?
Well, Oz and I are two completely different animals.
Yeah.
Oz was a lovely man, Peter Osgood. He was, but he had two kind of. He was very complex as regards. He was, you know, with when you got that kind of at times genius.
Yeah.
He come from the building site in Windsor and then become an overnight sensation really at Chelsea. The King of Stamford Bridge is quite a title when you think they've had Jimmy Greaves and Roy Bentley and everybody else there. So I remember going in this morning and to meet Tony. I'd agreed to sign on the Friday night, and I said, I've got to go and speak to my father. He said, good idea, speak to your father, and then I'll see you at the bridge in the morning. And Tony turned up late, and he looked like he'd not been to bed. He looked like Columbo, in fact. He looked like he slept in his suit, and then I realised, I thought, I've signed for the right manager. He's been out all night, and he admitted. He said, I've been up all night. He said, I've been waiting for your mate to get back to me. He promised to phone me in the early hours because he was going down to. He promised Laurie McMenemy he'd meet him before he made up his mind, and I knew as soon as Tony let him out of his clutches that Ozzy wouldn't sign for us.
Yeah.
Because Ozzy's whole life was all about Windsor, Southampton. He loved his horse racing. He loved Mickey Shannon.
Yep.
Once he got down into that environment, he was going to go there. He weren't going to go to the Potteries. He wouldn't have liked the Potteries.
Yeah.
That was like Frank Sinatra signing in the Potteries. You know, he wouldn't have went to the Potteries. No, that was his lifestyle, and he wanted it. He had the big house in Epsom. He had the Jaguar, and that was Ozzy's lifestyle. And he made a massive mistake. And he came up for my first game against Liverpool, and I said to him on the Thursday night, I said, "What have you done, mate?" You know. And he said, "Al, I really thought you was only coming up here because they're the only team that wanted you." I said, "Well, they were the only team that wanted me, but I don't care where I don't care where I go." I said, "I really don't care. I want to go where I'm wanted.
Yeah.
I don't want to be at Chelsea if they don't want me, and I don't want to go somewhere where they don't want me. I knew that Tony Waddington bought me because on that night, on the Friday night that I agreed to sign for him, he didn't talk about money. We never spoke about money. He just said, "I'll look after you." And I said, "I'm not interested in money, Tony. I'm interested in football." And he said, "Well, that's why I'm here." He says, "No, I've signed George Easton, I've signed Roy Vernon, I've signed Peter Dobin, I've signed Jackie Moody, I've signed Stanley Matthews, signed Jimmy Greenough." And I said, "Now you sign me."
Yeah.
And that was it. That was his conversation to me on the park bench in Russell Square. He spoke about the players he'd signed, and that is how he wanted me to play. And he never once told me any more after that about how to play football.
Genius. Utter
Absolute genius. I walked away from him. I went home to my father, and I'll never forget. And my father said straight away, and a lot of fathers would. I remember Dale Jasper some years later. I tried to get him there, and his father said, "I don't want him to go north. I don't want him to leave London." My dad said, "Get out of London straight away. You're going downhill rapidly." And this fella knows his football. And that was at the end of the day, it's all about football. Terry Neal, as you say, it was all about Terry Neal. It was all about his ego. He thought he was bigger than the football club. Well, no man is bigger than any football club. And even in today's game with so much money, you're never bigger than the club.
No man is an island. Although, did Carly Simon write that song about Osgood, You're So Vain?
No, it fits him very well. I could easily, sit there having lunch with Oz and sing "You're So Vain," and he probably wouldn't get it, because I used to dress Ozzy. I used to take him to the clothes shops and tell him to give him the best suits. They dress the best centre forward in the country. And then he was going out with a girl. I used to say, play this song to her, and you'll be okay. And You're So Vain would have been, if he was if they made a movie, he probably would have starred in that.
Son of a gun. You walked into the party like you were walking onto a yacht. Your hat strategically dipped below one eye. Your scarf, it was apricot. You had one eye in the mirror as you watched yourself gavotte. And all the girls dreamed that they'd be your partner. They'd be your partner. And you're so vain. You probably think this song is about you. You're so vain. I'll bet you think this song is about you. Don't you? Don't you? Oh, you had me several years.
But that song that you did tell us to play for the girl was All I Know by Art Garfunkel, wasn't it? And you sat there in Alexander's and you was talking to him, because again, that come from Chelsea's infamous trips to Europe, and when a number of the Chelsea players had too much of that Spirit in the Sky, didn't they, in 1971?
Well, it was not only Spirit in the Sky, it was Spirit in Bed as well. I think the European Cup Winners' Cup was it was an amazing journey, really.
Yeah.
But it was a nightmare for wives. I think there was 4 divorces come out of that year through Caledonian Airways and British Airways stewardesses, and and even the night, I remember the night we did Blue is the Colour, and we was on Top of the Pops, and Pounds People, there was 4 Pounds People down in Alexander's after with the boys, wherever they went, they were wreckers, But it was I think what it was, we didn't they see that them trips into Europe were bonuses for because they got to have a. I mean, I loved it. I love touring. I write a thing in my book about touring. I just loved travelling, and when Waterton was like that, he just couldn't take us away enough. He said you don't learn nothing staying at home. You got to see the world, and that's what happened in Europe. But it got too many boys in trouble. They were all getting divorced. And that kind of, God knows what would have happened if we would have won it again. There'd have been no. And we should have won it. We should have won it the following year. We got knocked out by a dodgy Swedish team. We battered them for over 2 hours over both legs, and how they won, I'll never know. I think probably Dave had gone to church on the Sunday and prayed that we didn't win it again.
I bruise you bruise me. We both bruise too easily to let it show. I love you, and that's all I know. All my plans have fallen through. All my plans depend on you to help them grow. I love you, and that's all I know. When the singer's gone, let the song go. But the ending always comes at last. Endings always come too fast. They come too fast, but the past too slow.
But the lines in that track, all I know is, does it go "you bleed, I bleed," or "I bleed, you bleed"? It's a love song, isn't it?
No, it's Bruise. It's called
Oh,
Bruise.
sorry, bruise, isn't it? You bruise,
Yeah,
I bruise. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I said it applies to Hutch as well with centre halves.
Doesn't it just?
Yeah, and I bruise you, you bruise me, and it's just a term. Obviously a term. It's not to do with anything violent, but Hutch might see it that way. He
But-
would have, he would probably say to centre half when they walked on, "Have you heard that record?" And they'd say, "What record's that?" I said, "Well, we'll find out in the next 90 minutes." But yeah, but Oz, and he said to me one day, Oz, he says she loves Pippa Cook Smith, her name was.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said she loves that song. I said, how do you do it? Well, so I said, yeah, the reason, I'll tell you how I do it, Oz, I don't come from Windsor.
But you did go to Windsor with a young lady, didn't you, and visit the bar that Hutch and Osgood had? Was it the Union Pub in Windsor?
It was. They made it very famous again. I think Dennis Fortman might have been in there, my old mate Dennis. I think Suggs might have popped in there to see them. People made a beeline for them there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a sad indictment of our game, really.
Yes, it was.
Here we were with Osgood. If it's all about, again, ifs and buts. Again, that podcast yesterday with Jeff. One man can ruin your life. If Ramsey had seen what I saw, and we all saw at Chelsea that Osgood was the best centre forward in the country, then I believe I think England were better in 1970 than they were in 1966. I think we were a better team. It was just a shame about Gordon Banks. You know, the food poisoning. They were set out to get us knocked out. Whatever. Bobby Moore with a bracelet. And had Alf Ramsey seen that Peter Osgood was the best centre forward in the country, then I think that had he not pulled Bobby Charlton off, and if I'd not got injured, I think I would have replaced Bobby Charlton, which I heard later on. But Osgood would have come back from the 1970 World Cup hailed as the best probably centre forward in the world, because in 1970 there wasn't not even the Brazilians had a great centre forward. He would have fitted perfectly into the Brazilian team. He was that kind of player, Osgood. He was, you know, in the team that followed them, they had a player very much like him. You know, the tall fellow. Was he a professor or something?
Are you talking about Dr. Socrates a bit further on in the 80s that played more of a kind of midfield? Well, he was the general, wasn't he? Yeah.
They had, but that was kind of, it was very that they had one player who was very much like Osgood. He was very
similar build, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he was very comfortable on the ball. And I remember in '66 the Hungarians had a geezer called Albert.
Yep. Big run.
And he was very much like Osgood. So Osgood was a total one-off player, because if you see him coming at 6'2", you didn't think that. You think, well, he's a centre forward or a centre half, but you didn't know what he could do. He could score goals, volleys. He could score right foot, left foot volley. Great head of the ball. He curled balls, beat people. For a big man, he had fantastic balance. He had it all, Osgood. Yeah. So had Ramsey had seen that Ozzy was the best, he could have come home 1970. I wouldn't say his world would have been better as regards financially, because look at Bobby Moore, how he ended up.
Yep.
But he would have been recognised for what he really was, and then it broke Ozzy's heart. And I remember Bobby Moore, seeing Bobby when they came back, and he said to me, he said, your mate in Mexico, he said nothing what I've heard about him. He said he trained, he was fit, he was eager, he was ready he wanted to take on the world, and he could have beaten him.
The bloke from Windsor saved our skin more times than any dermatologist is a great line from you, Al, about Oz. He also come out with a great line to your girlfriend at the bar, didn't he, in Windsor? He was a ladies' man as well as anything, wasn't he, Oz?
Oh, well, he always had to, you know, you didn't know. I wish he could have. I wish we could have lived forever. But I still wouldn't have got to the bottom of him. But he always had to have that little something. You know, he was Peter Osgood, and the girl come in. She looked stunning. This young lady, and it was a cold enough evening, and I introduced them, and I didn't take any notice, because we were going out to dinner. I said I just popped in. I couldn't come to Windsor and not come in to see you. And then Hutch was come out the kitchen. He was cooking and had a bottle of port in his hand. And I was just turned around. He just quipped. He said, I didn't realise you'd be so pleased to see me, love. And she kind of smiled. I don't think she got it, because she wasn't English.
Oh, right, okay.
But and I just looked at him, and he just shrugged his shoulders, you know, to say, I've got it, and I thought, no, Oz, you haven't got it, you know. But that was us.
We started with Zoom last podcast. We're going to finish with Zoom. Zoom's another current running theme as well. How are the Zoom videos going? I loved the Shanks and Hudson show that Martin Knight's going to be introducing and presenting. That looks as though it's got great legs, because you two guys have got fantastic tales to tell.
Well, I think it's going to be a success. I think we've just scratched the surface really, and we're playing at it. But Don's coming around tomorrow. I think we've seen enough. We've only done a 2 or 3 like demos, and we're going to get cracking tomorrow. We know what we got to do. Martin Knight is superb.
Yep.
He's a great front man. He's got the experience. He wrote Dave Mackay's book. He wrote Charlie's book. He wrote Ozzy's book. So he's very well genned up. He's not very self-admittedly. He's not very good on the modern day game. He's fell out of love with that.
Yeah.
But he's great. He's great on what we need to do. And me and Shanks get on like a house on fire. His best mate was Stan Bowles, so we got a lot in common there. But we also had a coaching school together in the 90s, me and Don, the Hudson Shanks Football Academy, Soccer Academy. So we go back, and we're the good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
He, as I said on the show yesterday, you smash him, and I showed a little bit of subtlety. And Don kind of bites at that, and he wanted to kick me yesterday. He glared at me, and he said to me afterwards, what do you think all that was about? He said to me. I said, well, that's Don. That is the way it's got to be, mate. If we're going to do this, we got to be honest. You smash him. Yeah. I said, let me put it this way. If we were playing together, and if I played with Don, he was a good player, Don, as well, very underrated. And I said to him, look, Don, I need you to do me a favour. He'd say, what's that? And I say, well, look, I'm going to go missing for 5 minutes. I'm going to drift on the left-hand side, and I'm going to knock the ball over to you between you and Billy Bremner, and I'd want you to do something for me, and that would be it. Yeah. He would sort Bremner out. So that was it. That was his game. That was his game, and he wouldn't mess about. Bremner wouldn't get up.
Yeah.
Don was tough, and as he said yesterday he spoke about certain players he marked, and he was a good player. I wouldn't have liked to have been a winger against Don.
No, absolutely. But that book that Stan Bowles wrote, his autobiography, absolutely hysterical. And some of them stories that you're going to be bringing to life, it's going to be absolutely don't miss an unmissable podcast, the Alan Hudson and Don Shanks show. Al, we've run out of time. We're going to go out with one of your favourite artists and one of your favourite sayings and pretty much how you've lived your life, Day by Day by Frank Sinatra.
Why not, mate? Why not? It's a great song. And we used to have a chap in our local pub where it all started for us in Fulham, a fella called Ray Morgan, and he sang this song, and he could have went on a bit to be anything. And he sings this Day by Day. It's a lovely song. I think is it a Cole Porter song? Or...
I'm not familiar, but I am more familiar with the works of Frank Sinatra through knowing you, mate.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He's covered some great songs, ain't he, Frank?
Well, everybody in the Lord Palmerston, everybody that got up and sang in the Lord Palmerston, they were all wannabe singers, but Ray Morgan was the best. But if it wasn't for Frank Sinatra, there would have been nobody get up because there was no one to follow. It was like us as young footballers. We want to emulate great players like George, me with George Eastham, inside forwards Johnny Haynes. If we had no one to emulate, there wouldn't be. If there were no history, that's what annoys me about the game today. Without yesterday, there would be no tomorrow.
Absolutely, and what a wonderful way to finish part 10 of My Life, My Music with the Governor, Alan Hudson. So till next time, Al, cheers, pal. Love you.
Always a pleasure, Paul.
Cheers. And thanks for listening, guys. Cabbie.
Cheers, pal.
Ta.
Day by day, I'm falling more in love with you, and day by day my love seems to grow. There isn't any end to my devotion. It's deeper, dear, by far than any ocean. I find that day by day you're making all my dreams come true. So